Welcome to my channel. This is part 5 in a 9-part series on drafting a pattern for an 1870s evening gown based on a design by the acclaimed costume designer Susan Tsu. In this tutorial, I will teach you how to draft the apron and the yoke that the apron, train, and bow all attach to. Let's get started. Alright, I have open the project file from the previous section of the tutorial where we made the sleeve, and the whole garment is hidden, but you can see in the 2D pattern window that we have the bodice, the sleeve, the collar, and the skirt. So I'm going to go ahead and for the first step, I'm just going to scroll in to the bodice and I'm going to grab the trace pattern tool, which is the I hotkey, and right here in the 2D toolbar. And I'm going to hold shift and click all of the pattern pieces that I want to make up the yoke based on the bodice pattern. Now you'll notice that at some point I must have locked these internal lines. So I'm going to have to go to the 2D display options and then unlock my internal lines by clicking this icon right here. All right, now I am able to select full shapes. So again, shift clicking all of those. And when you have everything selected like I do, you can go ahead and right-click the selection and then choose Trace as a Pattern. Once that's done, you can go ahead and click anywhere in the 2D window. I'm not sure why this one doesn't trace, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it again, and there we go. For ease of following along with written guide, I've temporarily labeled these yoke pieces 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're going to go to the Edit Pattern tool, or the Z hotkey, and that is right here in the 2D toolbar. And I'm going to go ahead and shift click these lines where I want to connect 5 and 4. It's basically where they would be seamed together on the bodice, but we're going to go ahead and connect them to make one continuous shape, and that's going to be our yoke. So I'm going to right click that selection on the second one, so the 4, and then choose merge, and that's going to merge 5 to 4. And I do want to go in this order because I ultimately want the grain line to be the grain line of section 1. So I'm going to click this line on 4, holding shift, click this line on 3, and then right click on 3, merge, and that merges 4 to 3. Now same with 3 to 2, right click on 2, merge, 3 is merged to 2, and now 2 to 1, right click on 1 and then merge that. All right, so now we have this yoke half that is essentially the shape of the lower half of the bodice. And this is center back and this is center front. So knowing that this is center back, we're going to go ahead and right click this line on the edge of 1 and then choose unfold symmetric editing with sewing, because we want this yoke to have a front closure. Ignore how crazy it looks over here for now. All right, I went ahead and relabeled these corners A, B, C, D, and knowing that those labels are labeling these points that are the corners basically of this pattern, I'm actually going to go to the Edit Pattern tool and shift click all of the points in between these lines that are not those points. So anything on the internal part of the line, not the corner points. Right click them and then choose Convert to Curve Point, and that's just going to smooth that out and get those points out of the way so that we can do a little bit more work. The next step, we're going to right click line CD, so this line right here, and choose Offset Pattern Outline, and I'm going to, for the first option, choose retract, and that limits a lot of our options, and we only want to retract it 1 inch and number of offsets 1, and that's just going to make sure that our yoke is actually shorter than the bodice so that we don't see it underneath the bodice pattern. Okay, now we can go ahead and sew the center front of our yoke. So go to the segment sewing tool, or the N hotkey, and that is right here in the 2D toolbar. And just click A to C on one side and A to C on the other side. So that's ready to go. And once it's sewn, we can go ahead and place it on our avatar. So I'm actually going to turn around to the back. It's going to be easier. Grab the Select Move tool, or the Q hotkey that's over here in the 3D toolbar. Click your yoke pattern and then Shift F on the keyboard will show all these arrangement points. It's kind of funny. It doesn't really give you a great option So we're going to have to use the gizmo to kind of rotate it and put it into place. Once it looks good, you can go ahead and press the space bar to simulate, and that will put your yoke in position. You can make a few small adjustments, and once you like what it looks like, go ahead and right click and choose freeze or Control K, and that will keep that yoke in a good position while we work on the rest of the apron. Speaking of the apron, we're actually, rather than patterning it flat, we're going to drape the apron onto the body, and we're going to use the position that the yoke is sitting as a reference. Before we drape it though, we're going to need to get rid of our previous draping lines. So go ahead and go to the Edit 3D Pen Avatar tool, and I have my lines hidden. I just have to select that there. And Control or Command A to select all those lines, and just hit Delete on the keyboard. And that will keep those out of the way while we drape the next part of the project. And to do that, we're going to go to the 3D Pen Avatar tool. That's right here in the 3D toolbar. We're going to hold Shift to give ourselves our center line. And then your first click is going to be near the end of this center front of this yoke. So just somewhere around where that ends, you're going to click and then drag down about 30 inches. And then once you have that, go ahead and double click, and that'll be your center front line. And in the back, you're going to hold Shift again to give yourself a center back guideline. Again, click near the bottom of the yoke as your starting point, and then drag down, this time about 10 inches for the back line of the apron, and then double click to finish that line. The next lines, we're going to go ahead and, honestly, we're just going to actually connect these two lines together in a curve. So I'm going to start at the hem and click on the back. And then remember, you can use Command or Control to place these curve points. So while I hold Command or Control and I click, it's just going to place these nice curve points to give myself a nice drape. And essentially what we're doing is we're draping the finished drape of the apron, or the finished proportion of the apron. So we're not thinking about the pleats that are going to be in it yet. We're just aiming for that finished shape, and we'll add the pleats later. All right, starting the back again, I'm going to add the top, and I'm looking at my written guide for reference for what the shape should be. So if you have access to Patreon, I recommend you do that as well. All right, so that is my second line, and I might go ahead and move some of these points up. It's a little thin in this area, so just gonna drag that up using the Edit 3D Pen Avatar tool, just until everything looks like it'll give me a nice pleasing shape to the apron. Now, before we flatten, remember we need to straighten out our center front and our center back lines. So with the Edit 3D Pen Avatar tool selected, right-click this center front line and choose Flattening as Straight Line, and it'll turn bold so that you know it worked. And then the same with the center back, Flattening as Straight Line. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and flatten out the pattern. The flattening tool is hidden under the 3D Pen Avatar tool, so you have to click and hold and then choose Flatten. And then you can go ahead and click to select the areas to be flattened, and then press Enter on the keyboard, and this apron pattern will populate in your 2D patterning window. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it in a new space so that it's easier to work with, bringing my yoke with it. All right, I went ahead and labeled these points A, B, C, D, and we're going to duplicate this apron pattern with symmetric sewing. So go to the Transform Pattern tool, or the A hotkey, and that is right here in the 2D toolbar. Just click the pattern and then choose Control or Command D, and the ghost of the new pattern will appear, and just click anywhere in the 2D window to place it. There you go. And now, before we get any further, in case we accidentally simulate, we want to go ahead and tack the back of this apron to the yoke. So go to the Tack tool, which is in the 3D toolbar. And even though it's in the 3D toolbar, you can still work in 2D space. So I'm going to click near A or on A if it lets me, and then near D. I don't think it'll let me click right on D because it's a center line, and that will tack that to that space. You can also put a tack on the other side if you would like. and that will just hold that in place. All right, now we can start adding in the pleats into our apron. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the Edit Pattern tool, or the Z hotkey, and we're going to right-click line CD and then choose Offset as Internal Line. And we're going to do number of offsets 3 and then distance 4 inches. Now, the number of offsets you do is going to determine how many pleats that you put into your apron. So if you want more, then choose more. And the distance is just going to be how they're spaced apart. So the 4 inches gives me a nice even distance on my apron. And that's how I got to those numbers. So go ahead and click OK. And then on line AC, you're going to right click and then choose split. And however many offsets you do, you're going to split it one more. So we did 3 offsets, which means we need 4 uniform segments. And once you have that, go ahead and click OK. And now we can just click and drag the ends of these lines. Oops, I'm going to undo that. The ends of the internal points to line up with those splits that we just gave ourselves, so that on this side it's evenly distributed, and it is on this side as well. Now you can adjust some of these curves if you want to like a more pleasing curve, but you don't have to. You can, it'll be fine later. Okay, once you have all these points, we're going to still use the Edit Pattern tool, or the Z hotkey, and shift click all of these internal lines, right click, and then choose Cut and Sew in the drop down menu. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and space some of these apart so we can see what we're doing. Don't worry about this other side. We'll work on this one side for now. All right, ignore all of my wonky doodle annotations. All right, so with the Edit Pattern tool, only click the lines on the bottom of the pieces. So click this line, and then this line, and then don't click the very bottom. So we're just clicking the bottom of the internal lines, basically. Once you have those specific lines selected, right click and then choose Offset Pattern Outline. And now you want to say, instead of retract, extend. Distance is 2 inches, and that's going to be the return of my pleat. Number of offsets, just keep that at 1. Don't check create internal line, but side segment type, we want to be extend. And when we choose extend on this side, it's going to make the pleats fold up, because on the other side, we're going to choose mirror. You'll see what I mean. Go ahead and click OK. And now we're going to click the lines that we didn't choose. So the lines at the top of each piece that were a part of the internal line. So this one, and this one, just those 3 lines. And now you're going to right click, Offset Pattern Outline, and this time we'll keep it extend. We'll keep the distance 2 because we want the return to be the same. But this time we're going to check create internal line because we're going to use that as a fold line. And then instead of extend, we're going to choose mirror. So it's mirroring on itself, which means it wants to fold back into itself, which means the pleat is going to face up. Go ahead and click OK. And this looks like a giant mess, but don't worry, it's going to be fine. We're going to go to the Edit Sewing tool, or the B hotkey, and starting from the bottom, and this is really important, I'm actually starting from the bottom near the center. I'm going to right click this sewing line and then choose Merge. And it decides how it wants to distribute the difference of length based on which piece you right click, and I also believe based on which side you right click. So that's why I'm just, for consistency, always doing the bottom piece and then also towards the center. So right clicking that next seam line and merging. And then the last one up here, right click that and merge. And it's when I do that, it gives me this nice zigzaggy edge here that looks like it wants to pleat, which is great. All right, so because I want this apron to be one piece, I'm actually going to delete all of these internal points here between, I guess, lines B and D. My annotations flew away. So to make this easy for myself, I'm going to go ahead and go to the 2D display options, and this last icon is the 2D pattern lock, and I'm going to lock my internal lines just so I can click and drag with the edit pattern tool and select all of these points in between and delete them so that I have a straight center line. Once that's done, I'm just going to go ahead and unlock all of those internal lines again. And still with the edit pattern tool, I'm going to right click line CD and then choose merge, and that's just going to merge it to this other piece here. It still has the linked editing. You can tell because this line is dashed, but we actually want to get rid of that. So I'm going to right click this center line and then choose remove linked editing. All right, now we want to sew our pleats in the way that we want them to be sewn. So basically anywhere there's like a V, we're going to sew it to itself. So this is with the segment sewing tool or the N hotkey right here in the 2D toolbar. I'm just clicking to sew these pleats just like this. And we only need to do one side because we're going to end up sewing the backs together with the free sewing tool or the M hotkey, which is right here in the 2D toolbar. And with that selected, I'm going to click A, then I'm going to click C on one side, and then on the other side, I'm going to click A and then C again, and that'll sew my center backs together. That's this chaos back here. Before I simulate, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the edit pattern tool, shift click all of these internal lines, and because it's not symmetrical, I need to click all of them. Go into my property editor, and then for fold strength, I want to choose 100. That's a bit overkill, but it'll make sure that those are folding the way I want them. And fold angle, we're also going to do 0, which is also overkill, but that's going to make a nice crisp line that's going to fold my pleats up. And once that's done, I can go ahead and press simulate and see how those folds did. And it looks like my tack came undone, which is no surprise. So I'm just going to stop simulation, Control Z, and go back to that tack tool and just re-tack my pieces here. Okay, now let's try simulating again. And it did a really dramatic thing there, but it looks like everything's working. A little trick that I like to use is just right click and then choose strengthen. And that really enforces where all of these folds are and allows me to kind of manipulate this. Like, for example, I want this to go in, just, you know, force it into shape until it looks nice. And once it looks good, I can right click and unstrengthen again, and it'll fold into shape. There's a lot of editing that you can do to make this really, really lovely. And I'm also excited to see it in the taffeta fabric that we're going to use for this gown. But for now, that is the end of this section of the tutorial. We can go ahead and click the apron, right click, and then choose deactivate pattern and sewing, and then use Shift Q to hide it so that we can start working on the next part of the tutorial. And I will see you there.